Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, Attorney Lars shared a lot of interesting things from the perspective of a lawyer and from a perspective of how to protect the rights and all. But let me start by saying this that any software project is done to meet a business goal. And a lot of time we get confused whether meeting the deadline or the budget is the main goal. Um, in reality, the biggest point of failure might be once the business goals are not met. And the reason for not meeting business goal, other than probably the budget and time, can also be more online with the uncertainties, the risk. Now, what I have in front of you is called NTCP model, or it's called Diamond Framework also. It's if you want to read more about it, you can get this book. It's from Harvard publication, and it's called Diamond Framework for Project Risk Management or something to that extent. Now, let's try to understand what it has. Basically, what it says is before you get into any project, any contracting, it's best to look at it from this four axes. So the N is the novelty, meaning how unique, how new are you trying to, how often, for example, if we talk of accounting software, it's very low on the novelty side. But if you're talking about AI tool that does a whole lot of things automated for your specific business or something, which probably no one else has it, then it's in the platform to breakthrough region. So that's what you call novelty. And novelty may also have to take into consideration both your provider, you as a company, and the technology that you have available in the country. So something may be getting to be a more of like a platform derivative, let's say in the Silicon Valley, but in the local ecosystem with the vendors, maybe it's still pretty new. No one has done it. So all of those consideration gives you the novelty rating. The second is the technology side. Um, Now, when you say low tech, it doesn't necessarily mean old technology or something. We're not talking COBOL or something here. But what we are talking about is something that's well established, that's already kind of stable technology that everyone is using, compared to picking up something very new, like a tool, a framework, or you building something that hasn't been in the market for long, and you need it for your project. So that increases the risk. The other factor is the complexity. So when Attorney Lars or even when JJ was talking about very large projects, typically the reason it's large is because it actually is it's on this side of the scale, meaning there are lots of dependencies of sub modules and subsystem that has to come together, and everything has to work as planned for it to be successful. And this risk keeps increasing exponentially as you increase the complexity. And this is very important to keep in mind. And the last but not the least is the timeline. um, the thing is, when you talk to most clients, they usually want everything yesterday. That's the typical joke at the first meeting. But uh, this is something which needs to be thought through very clearly, because increasing the velocity or increasing the pace at which you want something done also increases the risk of the project, and it changes the entire nature of how you want to go about doing it, and the increases the chance of failure. So it's good to kind of have like an analysis at the beginning of a project, and that's the reason they call it diamond framework. It kind of creates a diamond of a kind to assess where does your project lie. And the question would be now, why does it matter? Why should we consider this? Because on the basis of this framework, and the next things we're going to talk about, you need to be able to define the methodology, like what project methodology should you go for. But at this stage, let me see this upfront, and we'll go into more details later. If you are not into software business, meaning your business is not selling software and software license, and if you come to me and say, Arup, okay, we want to build this, my first reaction would be, don't build software. If you're not into software business, do not build software. And I'll go back and substantiate that discussion in subsequent files, subsequent pages. Okay, now, so this slide talks about methodology, and I'll go more to it. Basically, we have project methodologies, or when we call it waterfall. So waterfall methods of project is what you call more of the predictive ones. So meaning, predictive would mean you can define in detail upfront everything that you want done in the project. The same way Attorney Lars mentioned that, you should identify milestone, and not only milestone, but along with that, you need to have clear acceptance criteria written down clearly. So when the milestone comes in, the criteria of testing it is upfront written. To do that, you need to be doing something which you can totally envision upfront. You can already have it well defined to the extent that you can test it. And that's basically a predictive project, a predictive software, or a project with predictive outputs, meaning you know what exactly you want. The reality is very different. You have, let's say you're trying to build something, and my next part of the statement would be, if it is predictive, it has been done so many times over, why in world are you building it? Just buy it. Buy something off the shelf, or better, subscribe to something that exists online. Because if it is, for example, like accounting software, don't build accounting software again, because you can pay $30 a month and get a software that's perfectly working, and you can get to start using it tomorrow. But we'll talk more about it, and maybe there are times when you need to build it, but this should be the last option. But in most cases, the reason you want to build a software is because you're trying to do something unique. You're trying to do something that you haven't done before. You're trying to build a tool that your company wants to be one of the few to have. You want it to be a differentiator for your business. Now, in that line, you probably do not have a clear idea, and trust me, I've been doing this for 20, 25 years now. Most of the time, most companies cannot define exactly what they want if it is something that is new. And it's like a movie, I can tell you a story of some movie, but you would not know till you have seen it. It's experiential thing. So software, by the nature of it, is you actually know whether you like it, or what features more you need, what tweaks you need, once you see it. Unless it's a very standard, like as I said, it's a HR software, or it's a accounting software, which is kind of common vocabulary, and everyone knows it needs to have A, B, C, this components. But anything unique you try to build, there's always a vagueness with it. So when you go into that territory, it's new, it's unique. You want to create a differentiated value proposition for your business using the software. Yet you cannot predict exactly what you need. How do you go about it? And that's where the agile methodologies come in. Let me talk more about it moving forward. In fact, there are various different methodologies to go by. So when the objective or the goal and the requirements are very clear, you do what you call linear project management methodology, which is primarily what you hear is the waterfall, where basically you start by defining the requirement, and then you kind of start building it, and then you test it, and then you roll it out, and then you move to maintenance, something like that. So that's waterfall. You finish one before you go to the other, and so forth. But if that's not crystal clear upfront, then you move to the other methodologies. And the most common, without going into too many of this complex discussion, because when the requirements are not clear, but your goal is clear, you go for what you call adaptive, which is or incremental, which is basically Scrum and Agile. And most projects you will either talk about waterfall or something like Scrum. There are other methodologies which are more relevant, especially when your goal is not clear, meaning you're doing a startup. And in a startup, your requirements keep evolving to the market findings. So you go out, you talk to customer, you think they need this. By the time you show them something, then you realize, no, that's not exactly what they want. They want something else. So your goals can keep shifting along with that, the requirement shifts. So that's where you come into the territory of extreme programming and all, but we'll not touch on that today. Let's go back to the core of it and the two primary methodologies that are involved and the responsibilities that lies with it. So waterfall methodology, the responsibility of defining the feature to the very detail, including having the test criteria for accepting those features, actually lies with the client. And if the client knows exactly what they want, they can define it exactly and provides this to the vendor. The vendor's responsibility is to define the cost and schedule of delivering it. And this is basically what you call plan-driven development approach. So a lot of the discussion that Attorney Lars talked about is about waterfall methodology. And the reality is there's a lot of projects in the country that are still doing waterfall. And from my personal experience, we have stopped doing waterfall for the last 13, 14 years now, because this is a recipe of unhappy. Everyone is going to be unhappy in this from my experience. It's the lowest chance of success, especially for a large project. It's okay to do it for a small 3 months, 2 months, 5 months max project. But as soon as you try to get into a waterfall for a very large project, it's always a heartache and pain. And even if you get it done, so like as a company, we have always the philosophy of delivering, not leaving in a project halfway. And we have always lost money on every waterfall project we did. And we have stopped doing it for the over last 10 years, 12 years now. So how do we go about doing it? We do it agile. So what happens in agile and how do you manage risk in agile? So client's responsibility usually is to set the budget and the time. So let's say 2 million peso and 6 months. And then you define what's your vision, what's the objective. And this is where you start dealing with unique things. And you start defining as a client what you need, while the vendor in a iteration, for example, most of the time in like a 2-week iteration, keeps delivering features that are complete and usable. So that's the key. If you get into agile, and then if your vendor is failing to deliver um, what we call shippable increments every end of the sprint, that's a red flag, and that's where you need to already have the hard discussion. So so the risk management of this is less in the contract, but more in what they call the the uh, proof of the pudding is on the eating. And every 15 day or every week, whatever is the iteration, you get an output, you see it, you test it, and if it looks good, you are happy, and the vendor goes about delivering incrementally. Now, what Agile allows is to change your requirement on the fly, depending on the market realities or new things you find, or once you have something, some components, you use it, you realize that you want something more. So it gives the client the freedom to change the requirement. In fact, it welcomes changing requirement to meet the business objective better, while without changing the cost and schedule. So you still work with that time box and the budget, but you kind of switch around features and functions to what gives the most business value. I hope that's clear so far. I have a couple of other slides before we can have a clear discussion. So, okay, I just wanted to share you, now since I talked about Agile, and I talked about sometime what you call minimum viable project, minimum viable product. Uh, there are wrong way of doing it, and there are right way of doing it. So this is not agile delivery. This also is not agile delivery. So this one is more actually a waterfall or milestone based delivery, while this one is actually, I don't know what, but this is a bad idea, because literally every iteration, whatever you produce, get thrown away to build the next one. The output of this doesn't go to this, or the output of this doesn't go to that. So this is definitely not good at any sense. This is the ideal agile way of building a product, where what you have as an output every iteration is somewhat usable. Um, and as you can see, this slowly evolves into what you need it to be. But the output from each version is already good enough to have a feel of what's coming, and you can provide input to adjust and modify to create the ideal product that you need. And lastly, I would like to share, so I have been saying for a while, like, you should not build custom software. Yet you want to have your unique business processes captured, especially at today's new reality with automation and digitization. Yet, if you don't go for building customer from the ground up, how do you do it? And the answer lies in what we call the no code and low code way of going about it. This is not very well known in the local industry, but this is the way the world is moving to. And the main benefits of going low code and no code is super fast, meaning you can build a solution on the fly in matter of days, not months. You can have the full flexibility, and the modern way of no code, low code provides scalability like anything. Like, you can build it and you can start using it for 5 people today, but if you need to move it to 5,000, it's just add in more license and boom, it starts working. Nothing to change, nothing to do. Simple and fast integration. Usually most of the good tools in this category comes in integrated with or integration ability built in, so you can easily integrate into solutions and tools that you already have or are using currently as in your business, for example accounting system, inventory system, etc. And the other thing is it can do without having software developers. Of course, you need certain amount of knowledge of building a solution, but it does not require coding, which eliminates a whole lot of problem, including a lot of things that Attorney Lars was mentioning, like, if a developer leaves halfway, how will you continue, etc. That doesn't matter because there's no code to read or change. And depending on the license and business type, but yeah, most of the time you have the license and you can actually keep building many different applications on it. Something like, what you do with, say, Excel, you can keep building different models and using it. And one of the other things that it eliminates is no more hosting, no more maintenance. So someone else is already taking care of all the cybersecurity worries that you need to have, or the hosting, and it's taken care of loading and working 24/7. You don't need a team to buy and maintain servers and everything, and no more cost of electricity. And there's so many other costs that comes into consideration when you have it running on your own data center that gets removed. Like I said, security is nothing to worry about. And the best thing is it's purely OPEX. So, you pay as you need. There is literally no more CapEx. And, you increase the usage if it's making business sense. You reduce or remove or replace if it doesn't make sense. And the cost of making mistakes and risk goes down substantially. So this is the way to go for doing new softwares, and literally it can save you 90% of time, 90% of cost, and gives you all the flexibility in the world. Now, this is my last slide, and you may or may not be able to read it all. If you do some search, you can find it, but there is like hundreds of different low code, no code software, like I'm saying, and each of these are for their own specific need. For example, Wix. So Wix is for building a you can build a website, as well as you can easily build an e-commerce with it. And it costs nothing, like $10 a month or something like that. You don't need a developer. You can just do it all by yourself. And there are so many more for various different things that you can use. Well, that's mainly it, I guess, what I have to say here. The only other thing is Quick Reach is our product, and that's what we also do, other than building software for clients. So it's not all from outside, but there are also local companies and all doing it as needed. I think that's about it, what I have, JJ. Back to you.
All right.